cold crept over the plains like a living thing, slithering low along the ground and wrapping itself around anything unfortunate enough to be caught outside after sundown. Cole Maddox felt it in his bones, even through the heavy jacket he wore and the lingering warmth from the long day's work. The sack of feed over his shoulder wasn't lighter than usual, but tonight he felt every pound. It had been a day of mending fences, settling cattle, and dealing with a stubborn bull that nearly took down half the corral. He was exhausted, hungry, and ready to collapse into the old leather chair by the stove. Asterisk, he wasn't expecting anything, certainly not a voice. Asterisk, he heard it faintly at first. So faintly he wondered if the wind was playing tricks on him. A breath, not a word. A tremor in the dark. He stopped mid-step, the cold air stinging his lungs as he listened. The ranch stretched in all directions, fields, shadows, distant hills. Everything lay quiet except the soft rattle of dry grass. Asterisk, then it came again.
Asterisk.
Breaking the silence like a fragile thread pulled tight. Asterisk, please. Cover me. Asterisk, he froze. Not the wind. Not his imagination. Someone was out there. Cole turned slowly, eyes narrowing as he scanned the dim stretch of land between him and the fence line. The abandoned wagon sat there like a broken skeleton of wood and rust, half-tilted and long forgotten. He'd meant to haul it off weeks ago, but kept putting it off, too busy, too tired, too many chores waiting on him day after day. Now he was glad he hadn't moved it. Someone was using it for shelter. He lowered the sack to the ground, letting it fall with a dull thump that puffed a small cloud of dust. His heart kicked harder against his ribs as he stepped off the path. The temperature dropped even more in the open stretch, wind cutting through the fabric of his shirt as if urging him to move faster. Asterisk, another soft sound reached him. A whimper. A breath dragged through clenched teeth. Asterisk. His boots hit the frost-stiffened earth with sharp cracks as he closed the distance. He rounded the wagon wheel end. His breath stopped. Asterisk, she lay curled against the wooden frame, like a small bird huddled beneath the rim of shelter. Her dress clung to her body in heavy soaked folds, rainwater dripping from her sleeves. Strands of hair, darkened by wetness, stuck to her cheeks. She wasn't just cold. She looked frozen from the inside out, skin pale, lips trembling without pause. Her hands were pulled tight to her chest, fingers stiff and red, as if she'd been walking for hours and collapsed here, when her legs finally gave out. Asterisk, her eyes fluttered open only halfway at the sound of his approach. Fear sparked there first a small, instinctive flinch, but it softened almost immediately, replaced by a weary kind of relief. A silent plea lived in her gaze even before she managed to speak again, voice barely audible. Asterisk, please. Cover me, Asterisk. Cole didn't hesitate. He unbuttoned his coat with hands that moved faster than his thoughts. It was thick, lined, warm from being pressed against his body all day. He wrapped it around her, pulling it over her shoulders and down to her knees, sealing out as much of the biting wind as he could. The moment the coat touched her, she shuddered, inhaling sharply as if the sudden warmth shocked her system. Asterisk, her head tilted forward, resting weakly against the wagon's edge while she pulled the fabric tighter with stiff fingers. Cole crouched beside her, his knees sinking into the cold soil, positioned himself so his body blocked the brunt of the wind. Asterisk, she looked so small up close. Smaller than he'd expected? Younger too, though not a child. Just a woman who had clearly seen too much hardship for someone her age. Her boots were thin, mud-caked and cracked at the seams. The hem of her dress was torn, frayed as if she'd snagged it on branches or rocks. Everything about her looked worn down by miles and misery. Asterisk, Cole felt a heat rise in him, anger, not at her, but at whatever drove her into the storm alone. Asterisk, he brushed a wet strand of hair from her face, gentle so she wouldn't flinch. Her skin was ice beneath his touch. Too cold. He couldn't leave her out here another minute. He slid one arm under her knees, the other around her back, lifting her as carefully as if she were fragile glass. She stiffened for only a second, then melted against him, too exhausted to resist. Her head fell against his chest, breath warm but shallow through his shirt. The weight of her wasn't much. He'd carried heavier feed sacks without thinking. But this felt different. Precious. urgent asterisk. Her fingers clung to the front of his shirt. Not out of fear, out of desperation, a quiet plea not to be set down again. Asterisk, you're all right now, he murmured, though the words came instinctively, almost unconscious. She didn't respond, but he felt her breath change a faint exhale that sounded like surrender. Like trust, she couldn't quite give voice to. Asterisk Cole stood and adjusted his hold on her, pulling the coat tighter around her body. The wind picked up, slicing across the plains, but he didn't feel it anymore. He only felt the cold radiating from her and the steady determination building inside him. Asterisk, he began the walk toward his ranch house. Each step crunched through the frost, a slow march against the biting wind. The porch light glowed faintly in the distance, flickering like a beacon, calling them home. It felt farther than usual. The path stretched by the weight of responsibility resting on his shoulders. Asterisk, he could smell her no rain. Damp earth, a faint trace of something soft and floral hidden beneath the scent of cold. Maybe soap. Maybe a memory of comfort she'd had before the world pushed her out. Asterisk, as he walked. Her head shifted slightly, resting closer to the curve of his neck. A tremor ran through her again, though not as violent as before. She was warming, slowly, but not fast enough. He tightened his grip, holding her closer against his chest. Using his own body heat to shield her, Asterisk, the ranch house finally came into full view. Warm light spilling from the windows across the yard like a blanket laid out in welcome. Smoke curled from the chimney, a thin line rising into the twilight sky. He'd left the fire burning before heading out. He thanked God for that now. Asterisk, he pushed through the gate with his shoulder, careful not to jostle her too much. The hinges creaked. The old barn cat darted away from the porch steps when he approached. The wooden boards groaned under his boots as he climbed the stairs. Asterisk inside. Warmth hit him immediately, thick and comforting from the stove he'd stoked earlier. It washed over both of them like a wave. Asterisk, he closed the door behind him with his foot and carried her straight to the settling chair by the fire, lowering her onto it slowly. She whimpered when the separation of his body heat hit her, and he felt a painful tug in his chest at the sound. Asterisk. He grabbed a wool blanket from the sofa and wrapped it around her shoulders, tucking it beneath her arms. The firelight flickered over her face, revealing the exhaustion etched deep in her expression. Her eyes followed him weakly as he moved, watching him with a strange mix of gratitude and disbelief. Asterisk. Like she wasn't entirely sure he was real. Asterisk Cole knelt in front of her again, hands steady, voice low as he checked her pulse. Her breathing, the trembling in her hands. She was cold, far too cold, but alive. That was what mattered now. Asterisk, her lips parted, trying to form words, but she stopped halfway, breath-catching. She didn't need to speak. He shook his head gently, reassuring her. Asterisk, she was safe. She didn't have to explain anything tonight. Asterisk, he added more wood to the fire, filling the room with brighter light and deeper warmth. When he turned back to her, she had curled forward slightly, holding the blanket tight around her like a protective cocoon. Her eyes closed, not in fear, but in the simple surrender of someone who finally felt far enough from danger to rest. Asterisk Cole sat beside her, not touching her, but close enough that she could feel his presence, steady and solid. She leaned subtly toward the warmth of the fire, and he watched her breathing slow. Each rise and fall, a little easier than the last. Asterisk, he didn't know who she was. He didn't know what storms, literal or otherwise, had chased her across the plains. But as he watched her drift towards sleep, wrapped in his coat and blanket, something settled firmly inside him. Asterisk, she wasn't leaving his care until she could stand on her own again. No one would leave her shivering in the cold ever again, not on his land. Not while he drew breath. Asterisk outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire burned steady. And for the first time in a long while, the ranch house felt like it had been waiting for this moment for her arrival. Fragile and unexpected, like fate had simply decided this was where she belonged now, whether either of them knew it yet or not.